Below Priest Rapids Dam, March 1970, Bill Harwood of Portland, interviewed by Roger Patterson, said that he heard a noise outside his camper. He looked out with a flashlight and saw a hair-covered human-like creature about 4 feet away. It was light in color, 8 or 9 feet tall, and not particularly heavily built. He went in and closed the door. When he looked again with a lantern, it was gone. Near Stevens Pass, March 20th, 1970, Greg Lee of Snohomish filed a computer form stating that he and a companion saw tracks at about 5,000 feet in new snow. They were only 11 to 12 inches long, but 5 inches wide with 5 toes. The tracks came down off the mountain to the top of a ski lift, then went back up. Near Copolis Crossing, May 1970, about midnight, Diane Higby, Becky Figg, and Rosemary Tucker of Cullis Beach saw a 7-foot creature in the headlights, standing erect, very heavy, and covered with silver-tipped hair. Near Skamania, June 1970, Leroy Baxter of Skamania told John Green he and another man saw 2 18-quarter-inch tracks, 9 inches wide, in the dust on a clearing half a mile up Woodward Creek. They were 8 feet apart. Mount St. Helens, June 1970, National Wildlife, October-November 1970, tells of an expedition led by Bob Morgan of Miami, Florida, which found huge humanoid tracks in 2 different places on the mountain, 2 days apart. Near Tahola, June 1970, Alan Ebling of Pacific Beach told John Green he and a group of youth went to look at a place where rocks were supposed to have been thrown at some workmen. By the car lights, they saw an 8-foot heavy dark form leaning against a tree. They left. The next day, there was nothing by the tree. Near North Bend, June 14, 1970, a Yakima man told Roger Patterson that he, his wife, and another couple were sleeping out on an old road close to the freeway. He and the other man were imitating wolf and panther calls when suddenly they were approached by a 9-foot creature, very broad with eyes that shone whitish yellow. It had a domed head, a bull neck, and carnivorous teeth. The hair was brown and neat. They all piled into the car. It stayed around much of the night. North Gorge Campground, north of Bossburg, July 3rd, 1970. Norm Davis of KCVL Radio in Colville reported that his daughter, Lavon, found 18-inch tracks leading in and out of a lake. Mount Rainier National Park, July 9th, 1970. Wayne Thuringer of Kent, Washington, told John Green that he and a companion were on a trail between Sunrise Point and Mystic Lake, about 7,000 feet up at around 2 p.m., when they heard a noise like someone blowing into a bottle. They stayed still and watched as a large, hair-covered animal, very heavy, emerged out of the brush and crossed the trail. It was dark brown, about 8 feet high, somewhat bent at the waist and knees, and its face was ape-like. Yakima, Washington, July 10th, 1970. An Auburn, Washington man filed a computer report stating that within the city limits, but with the closest house 3 or 4 blocks away, he and some friends saw a very tall, very heavy creature standing in a small dike by their swimming hole, staring at them. It was hair-covered, dark, and had an ape-like face. They shot at it with a .22, but it did not move. They ran. Cub Lake, east of Darrington, summer 1970. A man from Bellingham, spending his spare time searching the area where 2 boys reported seeing 3 Sasquatches the previous summer, reported finding tracks several times. Once, he said, he saw a Sasquatch peering out of a bush beside the trail. He shot a color slide of it, badly out of focus, which does contain the blurred outline of an ape-like face. Beacon Rock Park, east of Skamania, July 31st, 1970. A Portland man filed a computer report stating that he saw a hair-covered creature sleeping in a cave. It was dark, and he could only see the foot clearly. It was human-shaped with flat toenails. He thought the creature was asleep, but then the toes twitched, so he departed. Near Walla Walla, August 15th, 1970. The Walla Walla Union Bulletin, August 30th, 1970, reports that Rich Myers of Walla Walla, riding a motorcycle on Mill Creek Road in the Blue Mountains, saw a creature 10 to 12 feet high, shadow-like, in the bush at dusk. He also heard it scream. Its arms were outstretched, and it had pale palms. Near Skamania, August 19th, 1970. Mrs. Louise Baxter of Skamania got out of her car to check if she had a flat tire near Beacon Rock Trailer Park. I kicked the tire, which was okay, and then bent over to see if possibly something was stuck under the fender to make the noise. I suddenly felt as if I was being watched, and without straightening up, I looked toward the wooded area beside the road and looked straight into the face of the biggest creature I have ever seen, except the one time nearly a year before. The creature was coconut brown, shaggy, and dirty looking. It had one huge fist up to its mouth. The mouth was partly open, and I saw a row of large square teeth. The head was big and seemed to be set right onto the shoulders. The ears were not visible due to the long hair about the head. It seemed the hair was about 2 inches long on its head. It had a jutted chin and receding forehead. The nose and upper lip were less hairy, and the nose was wide with big nostrils. The eyes were the most outstanding, as they were amber-colored and seemed to glow like an animal's eyes at night when car lights catch them. It seemed contented there and seemed to be eating, as the left fist was up toward the mouth as though it had something in it. I screamed and hollered, but whether I made any noise, I can't tell. I was so terrified. I know it didn't move while I looked. I don't remember how I got back in the car and how I started it. As I pulled out, I could see it still standing there, all 10 or 12 feet of him. Near Cascade Pass, August 8, 1970. Dick Grover reported to the Bigfoot Bulletin that Ronald Zimmerman of Seattle saw a light-colored creature, 6 feet or more high and very large-stomached, by a stream in an alpine meadow in Boston Basin, near Ellensburg, November 6, 1970. Oscar D. Hickerson of Renton, Washington, sent John Green 3 footprint pictures he took on Coleman Ridge, about 20 miles northeast of Ellensburg, at the beginning of elk season. He wrote as follows: "We drove into our hunting camp Thursday, November 5th, 1970, and set up camp. That night it snowed 6 to 8 inches, and the next morning we cut wood with our chainsaws and were splitting logs when a hunter from a camp below us told us about some large human-like tracks going through the camp next to him. He was real excited and said he was going to sleep with his gun loaded and wasn't going into the woods while that monster was in there. I told him someone probably strapped some large false feet on their shoes and made those tracks to scare someone. He said that was not so, because no human could step over 3-foot logs with snow on them and not disturb the snow. After cutting and splitting enough wood to last a week, we walked down to see the tracks. The sun had come out, but the tracks were still in good shape, and I took 3 slide pictures. We tracked the Sasquatch through the woods, and he circled all through the timber approximately 3 miles before he got out of the snow and went into Coleman Creek Canyon. I had to slide over some snow-covered logs he stepped over, which disproved my theory that someone put on false feet. Another thing that convinced me that these tracks were not made by an ordinary man is the depth in the snow. I weigh 185 pounds, and if I put something on my feet 17 inches long and 9 inches wide, it would be like wearing snowshoes, and depth penetration would be very little in comparison to these tracks. North Cascades, winter 1971. Flying and on foot, the Bellingham man who took the blurred slides in the summer reported seeing big tracks in the snow in several different areas, once east of Mount Baker. His passenger said he watched through binoculars a big, erect figure at the edge of a clearing at about 8,000 feet. Near Quinault, winter 1971. Lyle Erdahl of Quinault wrote to John Green that he and 2 school friends, looking for elk, found tracks in the snow, 14 inches long and 7 inches wide. Deming near Bellingham, January 10, 1971. Dick Grover reported to the Bigfoot Bulletin that Gary Willett and his daughter saw tracks 14 to 16 inches long and over 7 inches wide in fresh snow crossing their backyard. Tenino, March 2, 1971. The Daily Olympian, March 3rd, 1971, reported that Charles Smith and Margie Baker saw a 7-foot, shaggy-haired creature approach their car late at night and pat it on the top. The paper said it then got down on all fours and ran off. Mrs. Elmer Dodge of Tenino wrote to John Green that she had talked to the two witnesses and they said that it did not get down. It stayed on 2 feet all the time. I'm Kelly Miller, and welcome to Bigfoot Case Files. December 1974. The witness and his young family were on their way home to Denver from Los Angeles for the Christmas holidays when the sighting occurred. In the late afternoon, while traveling on Route 66 just west of Flagstaff, Arizona, the witness hit a strong snowstorm and pulled off to the side of the road to gain his bearings and check his map. He thought he might be lost because he hadn't seen another vehicle for miles and didn't even see any tire tracks in the snow covering the highway. He was driving a VW Beetle, which he left idling on the south side of the highway. While looking for the map, he glanced up to catch the sight of what appeared to be a large, bulky, two-legged figure running toward their stopped car from the rear. He mentioned that the figure had unusually long arms and legs for a man. The head appeared pyramid-shaped but rounded on top. It appeared to be covered in black or dark brown fur, and no clothes were observed. From his vantage point inside the car, he estimated the figure's height to be near 10 feet tall. He quickly put the car in gear. Feeling threatened and that his family might be in danger, he tried to accelerate away from the fast-approaching figure. The witness stated that the creature actually chased his car and came within 15 feet of the rear of his vehicle before he reached a speed of 45 miles per hour and began to put some distance between himself and the figure. The figure remained on 2 legs for the duration of the encounter and at one point even raised its arms over its head. When asked why he thought it wasn't a human, he responded that they did consider the possibility of a stranded motorist seeking help, but he didn't see anything to indicate another human was anywhere near his position. No other vehicles, no tire tracks in the snow, no headlights, nothing. Also, the figure was too tall to be a normal human being. The head was too large and sloped down toward the shoulders. The speed at which it was running in the snow was amazing. The face was pretty much covered with the same color as the rest of its body, almost black, maybe a little lighter. At the time, the witness was 24 years old and a member of the U.S. Navy. He did not believe in the existence of Bigfoot-type creatures. He assumed any reports of such creatures, or the Yeti, were hoaxes or imagined. The experience changed his perspective, and he is now a firm believer in the existence of Sasquatch. He currently works for the U.S. Squac Mint in Denver. July 1983, Oak Creek Canyon. My family at the time was very much into camping, and to this day I still hunt and fish whenever the opportunity presents itself. We went somewhere in the Oak Creek Canyon Slide Rock area and camped along the river. As usual, I took off on my own to fish. I was fishing along the bank, and behind me the forest was heavily treed with dense underbrush. I heard footsteps, not typical steps, but heavy, thumping steps. When I turned to look, I saw nothing, and the thumping seemed to stop. When I decided to get back to the more serious business of trout fishing, I heard it again. I looked around, and this time, when it stopped, I heard very heavy, deep breathing. I was scared and flattened my back against a tree, trying to peer around. I searched for the source of the noise, but could not locate it. I waited. I tried to make myself small. I was only 13. I stayed still for 20 minutes, my back pressed flat against the tree, trying to look around without moving much. All the while, I could hear the thumping walking sound and sometimes breathing. It sounded so close. Finally, it stopped. I regained some courage, shrugged it off as my imagination, and started fishing again. But I was still nervous. I felt watched. Again, the thumping and breathing. This time to my left, I saw it. A shadow in the dark woods, but an unmistakable one. I saw a dark brown or black body, maybe 3-inch fur, shaggy looking, 6 to 7 feet tall, moving away at an angle approximately 35 to 40 feet away. As soon as I saw him, he was gone. The woods were thick. We had a lab, and he would follow me everywhere if I let him. He was not well trained and could be a handful, but he feared nothing. Several times during the night and once during the day, I found him all the way in the back of the tent, shivering uncontrollably and refusing to come out. In fact, when I tried to force the issue a bit, he fought me and remained inside the tent, scared and shaking. July 1990, Highway 180 between the Grand Canyon and Flagstaff. My girlfriend at the time and I took a trip from our home in Albuquerque, New Mexico, to Los Angeles to visit my mother. On our trip home, we decided to stop by the Grand Canyon in Arizona because she had never seen it. We got there late in the afternoon and stayed to view the sunset over the canyon. We departed for Flagstaff soon after it had gotten dark. We headed down a less traveled stretch of road as a shortcut. The road had next to no traffic, and my friend and I took advantage of the time to talk. The highway was very curvy. We had just come out of a turn into a fairly long straightaway when we noticed something walking on the right side of the road on the shoulder. Note, the rest of this took place in a matter of a few short minutes, although it seemed like an hour. What we saw was walking upright like a man, but was noticeably larger. As we got closer, my girlfriend said, "Is that a bear?" It was at that moment that it became visible that our companion on the road was covered head to toe in brown to light brown fur or hair. That was also the moment I realized what we were looking at. I'd seen enough TV and heard enough hunting stories from my dad. I stopped the car. Our headlights now shone into the area, and the Bigfoot could see them. It stopped as well. We were about 50 yards apart at this point, maybe closer. It then turned to face us. I'll never forget this moment. It's burned into my memory. At first, the animal turned its head slightly to look back, but its head seemed attached to its chest, so it had to turn completely to face us. We didn't make a sound. We were in complete shock. Our friend was about 7 feet tall and covered head to toe in hair. The body was somewhat without definition. I didn't make out features like hips or gender. The arms seemed abnormally long, maybe to just above the knee. The face was mostly hairless and looked, well, without something else to compare it to, kind of like a character from Planet of the Apes. Not exactly, but this creature definitely was from the ape family, with just a touch of human looks. The eyes seemed to glow a bit green, like a cat or dog in the headlights. It stood there for a matter of seconds, and I could tell it was thinking about its next move. It ran its tongue across the front of its upper teeth in ponderance. It took one small step in our direction. My girlfriend went berserk. She screamed in horror. It stopped its forward movement, looked around, and headed into the woods near the road in a couple of strides. We never got another look at it. My girlfriend quickly composed herself and wanted out of the area. I agreed. We took off, and I made a wide turn around the area where the Bigfoot had once stood. I never got the feeling that it meant us any harm, but it was very curious about what we were. You couldn't convince my girlfriend of that, though. The event shocked her for life. She refused to ever talk about it again. To this day, I'm sure she's blocked it out. I, on the other hand, will never forget it. It took me years before I could tell my wife about my encounter. I'm only telling my story for my own therapy and in the hope that it will help someone else who has gone through something like this. Greetings. This incident happened in the summer of 2018. It was a nice summer evening. The forecast was partly cloudy, and the temperature was over 25 degrees Celsius. First of all, I'm an indigenous man and have been a firm believer in the big man, as we call him in our indigenous community, that the Opaskwayak Cree Nation. There are many tales of him in our community, and he should be respected if we see him. This is my tale. My cousin DB and I, SB, decided to take our sons to the local resort called Pioneer Bay, which has a campground and a sandy beach that stretches along Clearwater Lake, a very beautiful place during the summer. We were traveling in his SUV, listening to Kiss with our sons in the back seat. I was looking out the window. We were close, maybe a couple of clicks down the highway, with trees on both sides. On my side, there were railroad tracks, then the forest line. As we traveled, I caught something just inside the tree line. My eyes locked on it. I turned to my cousin, turned down the volume, and said, "DB, turn around, turn around." But my cousin was doing at least 110 kilometers per hour. He said, "What is it?" I said, "I think I saw something back there." It took DB a couple hundred meters to slow down and turn the vehicle around. We came upon the same spot, but the figure was gone. I told him what I saw. To me, it looked like a tall orangutan, at least 7 to 8 feet tall. It had its right arm extended out against a tree, and you could see the reddish hair hanging from its arm. It must have been at least 200 feet away, but I could see it clear as day. I knew what it was. It was the big man. I wasn't scared, just excited to see it. I said a prayer that day. There have been reported sightings around my area of Opaskwayak Cree Nation in the Pas. Some reports are on the BFRO website. Thank you, SB. This next story comes from Melissa in Oregon. These events occurred between 2013 and 2021 at Mount St. Helens, Washington. This follows an earlier report called "I Could Hear Footsteps Coming Up to My Tent." Hi, Lynn. I wanted to share another experience I've had with a Sasquatch clan or tribe in the area where I camp on Mount St. Helens in Washington. Let me give a quick background for reference. This year will be the 10th year I've camped in the same spot on the mountain. The Sasquatch there now recognize me and my camp and do not hesitate to come by, always at night. I wonder why they've never tried to communicate directly with me, as I've heard in other reports, but they've never really been shy about snooping through my camp when I'm in my tent at night. This experience happened in the early years, maybe the second year up there. In the last video, I mentioned one the size of a 12-year-old that I feel was a girl. She babysits her little siblings at times. This is the first time I saw one of her siblings. As it usually starts, I'm in the tent, ready to sleep. I'm lying there, just listening. I soon hear sneaking footsteps approaching. Most of the time, I hear quiet whispering along with the approach. If I may jump back to earlier in the day, I want to tell you about the agate I found in the creek. It had been used for smashing other rocks. I still don't know what they get out of this, but I hear it often. I had taken this agate to my tent for analysis. Feeling a tad guilty, I placed my hiking boots on top of it behind my tent before going to bed. I had also tied the line from my rainfly on the side of my tent up tight and high to my laundry line. This was to let air flow through the tent. It also gave me a great view of the meadow outside during the daytime. So as I lay there listening, I hear them approach. Next, I hear the distinct sound of my boot laces hitting the back corner of my tent. I know my boot has been picked up and the laces are whipping my tent. This goes on for not 2 minutes, but I am thrilled. Not long after that, I hear sounds at the side where the fly line is tied high. I hear a boing, twanging sound. That line is being pulled and released. I can see the movement of my tent walls going back and forth as this is going on. I'm amazed at the boldness of this. Whatever is doing this, they know I'm in here, awake. Fear? Thrill? I can't say which, but it was awesome. I'm thinking this is coming from the 12-year-old I had seen before. But then I hear a short giggle and a small Sasquatch the size of a 5-year-old jogs past the front window, slapping the peak of the rainfly on his way by. This window is on the front door of the tent. It is the largest, longest one, and there's no mistaking what I saw. Immediately I say, "Ha, I saw you. You're busted." Yes, I'm a talker, especially when much emotion is involved. Then, of course, I saw and heard nothing more that night. But through the years, I've heard who I think is this little guy, laughing, mocking me, and now doing fantastic owl calls. I believe he knows me and comes to my camp to do owl calls of the female barred owl, which is a story for another day because I need to get to chores now. I hope everyone enjoyed this. As benign as it is, none of my stories are terrifying at all. but they are some of the best times in my long life. Until next time, Melissa in Oregon. My name is John, and I was 24 years old when I saw two Bigfoot in August 2019. My grandfather, who was 77 at the time, had a stroke, leaving his right arm somewhat paralyzed with little movement in his fingers and his right leg. He walked with a limp, meaning he could no longer climb into his tractor. They owned 10 acres of land and lived nearby Altamont, North Carolina. Grandpa always kept things neat and mowed. However, after his stroke, he could no longer climb up on his tractor. My grandmother asked me if I would be interested in mowing, and they would pay me. I agreed to do the mowing job. However, I told them I wasn't going to do it for money. My grandmother makes the best homemade biscuits with sausage gravy and fried potatoes, and every time I would go mow, Grandma had breakfast ready for me. After breakfast, I would mow around the house with the riding lawnmower. And lastly, I would take the tractor out into the field that was surrounded by trees and mow down the weeds. It was around 10 a.m. and I had finished mowing around the house, so I headed to the barn to get the tractor to mow the field. Even though it was August, this day was cloudy and a bit cooler than normal. I was almost finished when I noticed something off to my right in the tree line. I saw a large black animal move from tree to tree. My first thought was that it was a bear, but this animal was around 8 feet tall. I decided to get the heck out of there and head back home. Now, in order to get back to my grandparents' house, I had to take the tractor back out onto the side dirt road, and the only way to get there was to drive next to the tree line. I thought about leaving the tractor and making a run for it, but then I thought, that's a stupid idea. So I decided I would pretend I hadn't seen the creature and just go. I headed out and kept looking into the trees, expecting at any moment I was going to be attacked. And as soon as I turned to go around a curve, that's when I saw them. Oh my God. The taller one turned to its right and started slowly walking more into the trees. The shorter one looked to be about 7 feet tall, and it just stood still and stared at me. This one was only 20 feet from me. Then it turned in a different direction from the taller one and started walking away. My first thought was they were going to circle around and jump me. There were no words to describe my fear at that moment. I was also in shock that Bigfoot is real and I'm next to two of them. I started screaming and cursing out of fear. I made it to the road and kept screaming like an idiot all the way back. I looked back often and I eventually made it back to my grandparents' house. I got off the tractor and my legs seemed limp for a second. It took a few minutes before my breathing was back to normal. My grandfather showed up and he asked me what was wrong and if I was okay. I said, "Grandpa, you're not going to believe this, but I just saw two Bigfoot in the trees." They were enormous, around 7 and 8 feet tall, and they walked just like humans but looked ape-like in the face. No way they were bears. Grandpa was shocked and very interested in my story. We still talk about it often. He knew something bad had happened to me that day. I still mow for them. It's now July 2022, and every time I go to the field, I keep my eyes open. Grandpa and I put some outdoor security cameras up just in case they come around the house. I think about them a lot now, wondering what they are. Anyway, that's my Bigfoot encounter, and I wanted to share it. Taylor, November 9th, 2010. I live in Forest City, North Carolina. I have not told my encounter with Bigfoot to anybody outside my family and a few friends. I know most people think they're not out there. I think they mistake them for bears. Well, I see bears all the time where I work in Linville at a resort. I've seen them from cubs to 600 pounds. I've seen them walking, sitting, and standing up. I know what I saw. One November day at about 3:30 p.m. on a sunny day, I saw something standing in the middle of the Linville River. It was not a bear. I was driving my truck on my way home and was crossing the Linville River Bridge, as I do many times on my way from my job. I always look down the river because it's so beautiful. This day was no different than any other. until I saw a large chestnut-colored object standing in the middle of the river about 100 feet from the bridge. I slammed on my brakes to slow down because it startled me. It was standing sideways, facing the same way I was traveling. When it heard my brakes, it turned its head and looked at me. It did not have pointed ears or a snout like a bear. From my estimation, it was over 7 feet tall. Its hair was not long and shaggy or nasty looking. Its face seemed to not have much hair on it. From my point of view, it had the physical appearance of a large man. Its legs were visible from the water to its hips. Its arms were longer than a normal man's and seemed to reach down to its knees. From the side I saw it from, when it turned to look at me, its head seemed to be egg-shaped at the top. Its chest, from the side when it turned toward me, was covered in hair. Its head turned all the way toward me, but its upper body only turned a little. All this happened in a matter of 5 to 8 seconds. When I came almost to a stop, it went out of view because of the bridge embankment. I went a few more yards, turned around, came back, and stopped. But it was gone. I know what I saw, and it wasn't a bear. Thanks for listening. I think you might find this video of interest as well. If you've had an encounter or sighting of a Sasquatch and would like your story told here, please email me, Lynn Smith, at bigfootcasefilesmail.com. I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Picture this. You're walking home one evening. You're alone, and the streets are empty. You walk a path you've walked 1,000 times. Suddenly you spot a road you've never seen before. Maybe there's suddenly a cozy bridge crossing the large river that usually forces you to take a detour. Maybe there's a meandering path crossing a flowery meadow where there should be a construction site. Maybe you find that a tranquil alley has replaced the busy motorway in front of your home. The road looks completely different each time, but some things are always the same about it. It's short, it's peaceful, and it will grant you your deepest desire. Imagine that. Imagine that taking it will give you whatever you want most in life. Start on one end and reach the other. That's all you have to do. But there's a catch. Of course, there's a catch. There's always a catch with these sorts of things, isn't there? I live in a small town surrounded by steep, mountainous hills. A little road behind my house leads up a steep incline, circling one of these hills until it finally ends in front of an old vineyard. The place gets busy in autumn. I've started hiking up there myself, part of my New Year's resolution. I hike up there 3 times a week, a bit higher each time. It was on one of these trips that I encountered the vag. I'd sat down on a large rock in the shade of a lone pine tree and was about to bite into the sandwich I'd brought along as provisions. Suddenly, a disheveled figure stumbled into view. He was thin, his dusty clothes too wide for his scrawny body. A thick beard covered his face, and dirty strands of hair hung down from his skull in a wild, tangled hairstand. He took a few steps, dragging his feet over the asphalt. Then he noticed me. He approached, his hungry gaze fixated on the food, then looked away, feigning disinterest, and dropped down to the ground where he pretended to massage his ankles. I instinctively scooted away from his figure, protectively clutching my food closer to my chest. He watched me from the corner of his eyes. What was this guy doing here? There was nothing up this dead-end road. There were no cars, no people. Did he just get lost? I was about to scoot even further when I noticed his shoes. It was hard to even call these things shoes, considering the state they were in. The soles were worn down to the point they'd basically ceased to exist. His bare feet were clearly visible through the large gaps, coated in dirt, swollen, calloused. Something had recently torn into the skin beneath his big toe. Clotted blood spread all around the fresh injury. I instantly felt regret at how I'd reacted to the stranger a moment ago. All that suspicion and distrust. I cleared my throat. Hey, you want a bite to eat? I leaned slightly toward him and held out the piece of bread. His head snapped up as if he'd just been waiting for his cue. Oh yes, he said with a raspy voice. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. He rose back up and took a few more steps toward me, limping slightly whenever his injured foot touched the ground. As soon as he was close enough, he reached out, hesitated for a second, then snatched the sandwich from my fingers with a sudden motion, as if afraid I might withdraw the offer at any second. His body dropped down into the dirt again. "Thank you," he managed to say with bulging cheeks as he hungrily took the first few bites. The bread vanished in record time. He wolfed down the food, clearly not bothering to chew half the time, and I looked away to give him a bit of privacy. "Have you ever heard of the road that'll make your deepest wishes come true?" he suddenly said. He was still chewing, but he'd slowed down enough to become a bit more intelligible. No," I answered with some hesitation. Picture this. You're walking home one evening. You're alone, and the streets are empty. You walk a path you've walked 1,000 times. Suddenly, you spot a road you've never seen before. He paused to take another bite. I leaned closer, still slightly confused by the direction our conversation was taking. Was he just sharing some sort of hobo legend to repay me for the food? Maybe there's suddenly a cozy bridge crossing a large river that usually forces you to take a detour, he continued. Maybe there's a meandering path crossing a flowery meadow where there should be a construction site. Or maybe. He suddenly stopped and looked into the distance, his eyes unfocused. Maybe you find that a tranquil alley has replaced the busy motorway in front of your home. He shook his head and pulled himself out of whatever vision had suddenly haunted him. The road looks completely different each time, but some things are always the same about it. It's short, it's peaceful, and it will grant you your deepest desire. He looked down at the last few bites that remained of the sandwich. Imagine that. Imagine that taking it will give you whatever you want most in life. His fingers tensed against the bread, and a few crumbs of crust fell to the ground. Start on one end and reach the other. That's all you have to do. He raised the last bite to his lips. But there's a catch. Of course there's a catch. There's always a catch with these sorts of things, isn't there? His mouth opened and the sandwich disappeared. For a bit, he just sat there silently chewing while I nervously tapped my fingers against my knees, waiting for him to continue. "What's the catch?" My voice finally broke the silence. I'd gotten more involved in his narration than I could have anticipated. He looked at me, then down at his now empty palms, as if waiting for more food to magically appear there. "The catch," he mumbled. "The catch, right? The catch is that you have to walk the road with your eyes closed. No blinking or peeking, no matter what. Doesn't sound so bad, right? It's such a short and straightforward route. How hard could it be to do this blind?" His voice broke and he closed his eyes, rubbing the bridge of his nose. It seems so easy until you reach the middle of the road, and the sounds come. A startling scream, as if some terrifying beast has appeared in front of you. Beautiful, angelic music beckoning you to look at its creator. The voice of a loved one who just passed away. No matter what you hear, keep your eyes closed. Or else what? Or else, well, it's said that. He stared down at the ground while one of his hands rubbed his injured foot. The wound had opened up again, and fresh blood was seeping over his soul. According to the legend, you'll be trapped on this road forever. Oh, sure, you'll reach the end, but then you take a turn, and you take another, and suddenly you notice that you've stepped onto the road again. It looks different, but you can tell, somehow. So you turn around and try to retrace your steps, but the path you just came from has suddenly changed. You stumble across it, confused, and then you look down and notice that you're on the road again. His breathing grew louder and more rapid. His hands wildly motioned in the air in front of him. So then you start running and running, faster and faster until your legs hurt. And still you keep running. The landscape flies by, rapidly changing. But no matter how much it changes, there is one thing that always stays the same. You're on the road, again and again and again, and you sink down exhausted, and when you wake up, you're back, and you walk for days and months and years, hungry and cold and tired, until you finally decide to end it all. So you do, and you feel yourself fade away. and you think you've finally escaped. And then he paused. And then your eyes fly open and you're back on the road. His voice had become more and more intense the longer he'd spoken. He was shaking. His eyes were staring into the distance again. I noticed that I'd grown equally tense. I rubbed my upper arm in an attempt to fight off that shivering feeling that had crept beneath my skin. Then I forced out a polite little chuckle. "Well, that's quite the story," I said. "Just one little hole. How could we ever find out what happens to those who open their eyes? If the story's true, they're trapped on that road forever, right? They'd hardly be able to tell anyone what happened, right?" Rationalizing the story in this way helped me get a grip on myself. He had told it quite convincingly, but in the end it was just some silly little legend. He nodded, then pulled his legs toward his body. "Yeah, you're right. I guess you're right." His head dipped forward and squeezed itself against his knees. "It was a car horn, he said. I blinked. "What?" "No demonic voices or angelic messages or siren songs, just a damn car horn. And I was sure I'd made it to the other end and that I'd accidentally stumbled into the road, so I just... He fell silent. I stared at him, my mouth opening and closing as I struggled to find an appropriate answer to this strange outburst. Before I found the right words, he suddenly pulled his upper body away from his knees, shook his head, and let out a laugh. I'm sorry about that. I'm just tired. It's getting late." He stretched his legs and began standing up. "Well," he said, trying to get a sense of levity back into his voice, "what would you ask for if you ever stumbled on the road?" I don't know. Money? Eternal youth, I guess. I'm not really creative when it comes to this stuff." I gave him a smile. "What about you? What's your deepest desire?" He stared at the horizon, which was slowly turning orange from the setting sun. "Getting home," he said with a gray voice. Then he took a deep breath and began to walk away. I sat there, the weight of those last few words pulling me down. When he'd vanished behind that last corner, I came to a sudden decision. I jumped up and began jogging after him. It felt wrong to just send him away like that. I was sure I still had a pair of sturdy shoes at home, shoes I never wore anyway. Might be the right size for him. Better than his current pair in any case. We'd passed the house anyway on the way down. I rounded the corner and stopped dead in my tracks. There should have been only one way to go. One single serpentine road taking a sharp turn to the right, clinging to the mountainside. Now, however, there was a second road branching off. It led straight forward through a calm patch of forest where there should have been nothing but empty air. I stepped closer, the vagrant story still fresh on my mind. Picture this. You're walking home one evening. A fresh smear of blood, vaguely shaped like a footprint, was visible on the gravel of this new road. Clearly, this had been the way the stranger had taken. I stared ahead, now standing right at the start of the road. It seemed completely harmless. I could see the end just a few hundred steps in front of me. My deepest desire, and all it would take was to walk this short distance. I closed my eyes and raised my left foot. The world seemed to freeze. I was still standing there, ready to take a step forward, just one little step. And then I just have to keep walking for a minute or so with my eyes closed. How hard could it be? And still my foot refused to move, refused to take this first step. The picture of that bloody footprint kept coming back to my mind. Being trapped on that road, walking and walking through freezing nights and burning days, through hunger and thirst, always walking until the legs give out and you crumble to the asphalt and you die, only to wake up from death and start walking again. My deepest desire. Just 60 seconds away, I couldn't do it. I opened my eyes, and the road was gone. My foot was raised over the abyss. The world had changed back to how it should be. I was standing right at the edge of a cliff, my foot raised into empty air. Just one step, and I'd end up as a shattered heap of bones down there. A sudden gust of wind shoved against my back, as if urging me to take this step. A few stones crumbled beneath my weight. I flung my arms around in panic, searching for something to hold on to. My foothold slipped. My knee buckled. I fell backward. My elbows painfully slammed against the ground. With panicked motions, I began crawling away from the edge, staring at the cliffside, at the place that for a short minute had been a road. And then it reappeared. Literally in the blink of an eye. 1 second, it was gone. My eyelids fluttered shut, and when I opened them again, there it was, along with the surrounding forest, as if it had never gone. I managed to scramble back to my feet. My heartbeat refused to calm down. I kept standing there, staring at the road while the sun slowly vanished beneath the horizon, my deepest desire, just a quick little walk. My eyes drifted down to the bloody footprint on the gravel, and I ripped myself away. I turned and began walking down the usual path, the path that I'd walked down thousands of times before. My deepest desire didn't come true that night, but I did get home. Certain events throughout history are so mysterious that just the mere mention of their name can send a chill down one's spine. Some have searched for answers to what happened during that cold winter so many years ago. Perhaps some have even died trying. As for us, let us begin our journey into the dark. On January 23rd, 1959, a group of students from the Ural Polytechnical Institute headed out on a skiing expedition to the northern Ural Mountains in Russia. Several days later, 21-year-old Yuri Yudin became ill and on January 28th decided to turn back. He was the only survivor. In January, this group of 10 students, 8 men and 2 women, had planned a route that would take them to the upper streams of the Lazva River in the Ural Mountains. They were granted approval from the City Route Commission of the Committee of Physical Culture and Sport. Excited and ready, they set out that very day. Igor Dyatlov was the expedition leader. All were experienced skiers. They planned to trek over 200 miles along a difficult ski route to Mount Oderton, a name which is said to mean, "don't go there." The group was expected to return by February 12th, but they had warned family and friends that the expedition could go longer than planned. February 12th came and went. After a week with no word, a volunteer search party was organized and later joined by the police and military. On February 26th, rescuers found an abandoned tent pitched on the highest slopes of Kolatsiakl, also known as the Mountain of the Dead. The front of the tent was fastened closed, but there were large slashes down the side. Signs, boots, blankets, cameras, and notebooks were abandoned inside. 9 sets of footprints led out toward the edge of the nearby woods. At the forest edge, under a large Siberian pine, they found 2 bodies, Krivonashenko and Doroshenko. The branches of the pine had been broken 16 feet high. Between the pine and the tent, searchers found 3 more bodies, Dyatlov, Kolmogorova, and Slobodin. The 3 were found separated 500 feet apart from each other. An inquest was started immediately after the first 5 bodies were found, and the initial conclusion was that they had all died of hypothermia. Slobodin had a small crack in his skull, but it was ruled out as a cause of death. Finding the other 4 bodies took more than 2 months. They were discovered at the bottom of a ravine in a running stream of water 246 feet farther into the woods. They were buried under 13 feet of snow. Although the temperature was over 20 degrees below zero, the dead were only partially dressed. Some were missing shoes, others had only socks on their feet. Some were found wrapped in pieces of clothing that had been cut from those who had already died. An examination of these 4 bodies changed the narrative of the investigation. 3 of the hikers had fatal injuries. Nikolai Thibault-Brignol had major skull damage, and both Dubinina and Zolotaryov had major chest fractures. According to the lead investigator, the force required to cause such damage would have been extremely high, similar to the force of a car crash. In addition, the bodies had no external wounds associated with the bone fractures as if they had been subjected to a high level of pressure. Dubinina was missing her tongue, eyes, and part of her lips, as well as a piece of skull bone. Zolotaryov had his eyeballs missing, and Kolevatov was missing his eyebrows. Parts of the inquest file made available to the public stated that 6 of the group members died of hypothermia and 3 of fatal injuries. There were no indications of other people nearby, apart from the 9 travelers. The tent had been ripped open from within. High levels of radiation were found on one of the victims' clothing. The forensic expert performing the post-mortem stated that the fatal injuries of the 3 bodies could not have been caused by another human being because the force of the blows had been too strong and no soft tissue had been damaged. The condition of the skier's internal organs was not released at the time. The official verdict was that the students had all died from a compelling natural force. The files were sent to a secret archive. In 1990, Chief Investigator Lev Ivanov gave an interview. He said that he had been ordered to close the case and classify it as secret. Officials had been worried about multiple eyewitness reports of bright flying spheres in the area. Some hikers, about 30 miles south, reported seeing strange orange spheres floating in the night sky. In fact, the very last photograph on a camera inside the deserted tent showed what looked like bright lights against a black background. There are many theories about what happened on that mountain. Was it an avalanche? But the tent was still standing. Could the Russian military have been testing some kind of concussion weapon? There is even one theory alleging that one of the hikers was not who they appeared to be. And why were some of the bodies and gear radioactive? Several people who attended the open casket funerals noted that the bodies all seemed to be unusually tanned. Another strange theory is called the Rule of 9. The Mountain of the Dead has taken 27 lives over the last 100 years, all in groups of 9. In 1960, 9 people died in 3 separate crashes. In 1961, the bodies of 9 tourists from Leningrad were discovered, and it all began in 1959 with the Dyatlov Pass incident. 10 hikers set out, but 1 became ill and turned back. Once again, a group of 9. In what is sometimes referred to as the American Dyatlov Pass, 5 young men from Yuba City, California, disappeared on February 24, 1978. The friends were on their way home from a basketball game, but they never made it back. A few days after their initial disappearance, their Mercury Montego was found abandoned in a remote area in the Sierra Nevada mountains. A local man who'd spent the night in his car witnessed something strange on the evening of the disappearances. Joseph Shans of Sacramento suffered a mild heart attack while trying to push his car out of the snow. He got back into his car, keeping the engine running for warmth. Later that night, lying in his car in severe pain, he thought there were people around his car with flashlights, but when he called out for help, they stopped talking and turned off their lights. After the snow melted in June, 4 of the men's bodies were found deep in the forest, 20 miles from the car. 3 of the bodies were in the woods, with only bones left by this time. The 4th man, Ted Wire, had taken shelter in a trailer where he had survived for almost 3 months before starving to death, even though there was food and heating material inside the shelter. Ted's body was found wrapped in sheets, his feet badly frozen. His death was ruled a combination of hypothermia and starvation. The 5th man, Gary Mathias, was never found, though his boots were discovered in the Sierras. There is no one alive who knows what really happened that winter so many years ago. Perhaps we never will.